Okay, in this video, we're going to go ahead and create our procedure. And I forgot I still got to zoom this in, but we're going to call our custom procedure through our API and retrieve any player ID, any entries that have a player ID of the one we passed in that we want to get. So we're going to modify our player data table real quick. We're going to add a new one. This one's going to be PID, and I just want to make it of the type integer. And by default, -1. So I want to move this right below is valid, apply, like so, and there we go. So because we're doing that, as of course we have to now add it. So int, what was it called? PID. And we're going to set that equal to, by default, -1. So now we have our player ID set up and matching. Let's go ahead and, did I already apply? Yes, I did. So we apply it. Now go back to player data, in which case we delete the rows that are there, apply. Refreshing is not doing what I want, so I'm going to select the rows again. Now we have it. So we have is valid, player ID, and then our coordinates. Now we want to create our procedure. So we're going to go to our store procedures, create a new one, and let's name this one get by PID, and we want this to take in a parameter. So it's going to take in of the type, so int, what's it called? I'm trying to think. We would name it underscore PID, like so. The syntax here is actually wrong. We do underscore PID, then the type, so there's int. And what we want to do is select all from player data, which is our table, where PID equals underscore PID, which is our passed in player ID. And we want to limit this to one result just to make sure so we don't get a bunch. Go ahead and apply. We can click this right here to open up a new SQL tab or SQL tab where we can enter in our own stuff. So we're going to call our procedure, which is call get by PID, and then we pass in the value. So I've already added an entry where we have the PID of 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I search for 1, 2, 3 and execute it, we get nothing. But if I search for 1, 2, 3, 4 and execute, we get 1. So we get our result here. So that's going to be the procedure that we call. So back in our Kotlin project, I'm going to actually go ahead and Google or try to figure out how to zoom in real quick so you guys can see better. Okay, that is a lot better there. So now we're pretty much going to want to execute essentially this. So the way we can do that is we create our own function. So here we would just do function get by PID or player ID. And then, dog's barking. The type that we want to return is going to be player data. So we're going to execute a query. So we want to do @query. And in here we can do the actual, like as if we're typing in native MySQL. So for example, we do call get by PID. We could do the same thing. So call get by PID, and for now we're just passing in 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can pass in true as it is native MySQL. Did I do this wrong? I'm pretty sure that's the info you would take in. It's native query equals true. And we also want to do the same thing. So value equals our procedure call. And now what we can do is, because we're not necessarily getting this through a request body, we're more so going to be passing in a single integer. So we kind of like we're passing in an ID, so to speak. So we're going to do the same thing at get mapping of the type player data, function get PID, and this one's going to take in obviously an integer. So eventually we'll have to move it up here as well. But I kind of want to give it more of a test. So we're going to call it all the same way. So that's going to be equal to player data repo dot get by PID. So this is going to fail because we have two get mappings that do the same kind of thing. So I'm going to play this one to player data test and then launch it. So I just want to see kind of what all happens to make sure it's actually functioning correctly. So we're going to go back to a get request. We're going to do player data test. And it doesn't matter what's in our body. Let's send it and see. So not found. Let's see, am I running this? Yes, I am. Okay, so we have API, player data test. Okay, it's test with a lower EST, and run it. And there we have it. So we have one entry that contains pretty much everything we need here. So we have is valid, ID, and our X coordinate. Now we're missing something. That's, I think, partially because we didn't actually adjust our entity. So we have to modify our entity to match it. So we currently have it set. So we have ID is valid, PID, and then our X, Y, and Z. In our entity, we have it as ID is valid, X, Y, and Z. So we want to add after our is valid, we do a var PID of the type int and set that equal to -1 by default. And we're going to rerun it. So this should return everything that is needed. So let's hit send. And there we go. So we now have our PID of 1234 that was found through this entry. So it's essentially calling our procedure just fine. And close you all down and we are good to go. So we now have a functional procedure. So even if we had multiple entries with 1234 as the PID for some odd reason, it would only select the first one that it finds. So we have that set up. Now we just have to make it so we can take in a, what do you call it? We can pass in an ID to it. So we want to pass in the player ID through the URL to our getPID function, which is then going to pass it into our query. So that's going to be kind of like a three-step thing. And what I mean by that is we do player data, and we could pass in like 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. And we would then pass that through to our get by PID, which would then pass that into get by PID in our MySQL, which would then retrieve any entry that it finds, well, the first entry that it finds, if there is any, that have an entry for PID where it equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to kind of have to do that little loop-de-loop there to find it. So let's go ahead and modify this setup here. So we do player data / and here we want to do PID, so player ID. And from here we can do at, was it request by path variable. And that allows us to pretty much get what we pass right in here to PID. We want to pass that in. So value equals PID. What are you planning about? I'm not exactly sure. I'll come back to that. Then we have our PID. That's going to be of the type integer. I'll go ahead and remove you because we are going to return a single instance. So we're going to do player data as the return type. And we want to go through and call get by PID. So we're going to return get by PID as the call. Keep forgetting there's no semicolons on this. So player data repository dot get by PID. So we're going to pass in through the URL 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. It's going to get stored. We pass that in. So we're going to pass it into get by PID. So So it is saying it's wanting a string, not an integer. So we got to convert this to a string, which means in turn, Actually, I don't know if that'll be that kind of same way. I'm going to print line. I'm going to print PID to string and just kind of see what happens whenever this ends up getting called. So let's see if we even actually can run it. I feel like I missed something kind of silly here. So we're going to pass in 1, 2, 3, 4. Goes through, prints out 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there isn't an issue there. Now from here, we can then take it in as a parameter to get by PID. So it is being brain dead here. PID with the type integer. And then the return type is player data. So we're going to have to figure out how to pass PID into this function here. So because obviously we want to pass in PID and then make it return. So currently I don't think that actually yet did return something. So that worked out all the same. We just have to get this guy into, I don't know if you'd call that what is it? I guess it's just a parameter in MySQL. Alrighty, I had to do a little bit of Googling on that one because I was flat out confused. So anyways, what we go through and we add player ID, pass it in. We want to get this ID into here. So what we do is we just pass it in like normal. So we do PID. And then here we can set it up so we pass it as a parameter. So we're going to do @param. And inside of it, we can do the name. So here it's asking us to import the needed, whatever you call these, import, include, whatever. And we want to give it the name. So this name right here is going to match what is inside of the param. So PID. Then we have just the value of it, which is PID, that's getting passed in, and then the type. So when we go through and run this, we can do our test. So inside of Postman, we pass it in 1, 2, 3, 4. Click it. Okay, so we ended up with an error here, so let's look at it. And I just realized the syntax error, so that's going to be colon before PID inside of the query. Let's rerun it, and hopefully that'll actually fix that up. I think that's what it was. Now we run it, and there we go. So we got our result back. Now if I pass in 1, 2, 3, for example, like so, it fails. So here we can use actually our success parameter that's passed in. So for example, let's see here, if success, we can do what we need to do. We can, for example, set up pawn. Otherwise, spawn new pawn at default location and create entry in data table, like so. So we're going to go ahead and give this a quick test by doing the exact same sort of thing. So we're going to pass in get / then we want to have the player ID. So in our case, we want to just mock up a fake one here. So we're going to do f string PID equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to pass in PID to that. So plus PID. So that'll have the same URL as this. Just give it the 4. We're doing a get request. Don't want to be posting anything to it, so I can comment this out. And I do not remember what the hotkey was to comment this all out. Then we just process the request. So once we process the request, we should be able to tell whether it was successful or not. So success, then we get the response. Otherwise, it fails. Let's go ahead and launch it. Back down here, we have success, and we get all the information that we have. We get the PID, ID, all that kind of stuff. Now let's change PID that's currently there to 1, 2, 3, 5 and apply it. So now when we run it, let's see what happens. It says success. However, the contents of it completely fail. So we did have a successful connection, so that was my mistake there. I misunderstood that. But we're not going to have our Boolean set up or anything like that to be able to really convert. So we're going to have to do a check to see kind of what all it's going to return and go kind of from there. So let's try to think here. So inside of here, let's see, that's going to return. Yeah, we'll just let it handle itself. Well, no, we should be able to fill it. Where is it? Get PID. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to fill this. So we're going to copy that. So we're going to do, what was it? R P data equals player data repo get by PID. And if we're pretty much going to try to construct it. We're going to try to construct it from here. So we could actually, no, because we can't set it equal to that in case it equals nothing. Regardless, it should, yeah. So we're just going to try to return P data and kind of see what all happens. What I'm hoping is it'll return an entity with all this empty information, like the default information. So that finds nothing. So we have the same issue, and that's successful. So we have an issue there. So we need to make it so when it does not find anything, it does not return the failure. So that's going to be something we have to figure out. But that'll be dealt with in a future video, because for now we're just kind of at the point where we have the base of what we need. We just have yet to do some small stuff to implement it. Like currently, we do not want this to be what returns in the object. So we could do a check and just see if timestamp is the first variable in it, and that would be a way to go, but we could probably do it a little bit cleaner. So we may do this at first, and then we might try to clean it up because oh crap, we're going on actually 17 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and actually stop this video now. But hopefully you kind of got the gist of what we're doing. So it's a lot of back and forth, obviously, but we are on a good track. So we should be able to have success and then be able to put our player wherever we need to. So we're going to set up our spawn, where we spawn our pawn and all that kind of stuff in here, and pretty much just go from there. So we should already have the default spawn or the default pawn type, so we can just kind of override it so it doesn't spawn anything, and we'll spawn our own class and just kind of go that way. So we're going to remove the default pawn class, possibly, or I don't know. I'll figure it out here in a minute. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you like what I'm doing and you want to support me, you can find a link to my Patreon down in the description below. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to join my Discord. That's also linked down there as well, and I'll try to help you out. So, I'll see you in the next video.